Hello, low ego action heroes. It's Debbie Levitt from DeltaCX.com, and today, evidently, is Monday, November 16th, 2020. Almost there, everybody. And this is episode 87 of our live stream podcast, Improving Your Observational Research. And I have a special guest, so special that he is beyond specialness, and I'm going to just let him in and let him tell you who he is, though he is a low ego action hero, and he may be a little bit too humble about who he is. He's someone who many of us admire, and I hope you will follow him on LinkedIn. I think you're Mr. Larry Marine. Round of applause.
Hi, everybody.
I need a sound effect. Wah! Crowd goes wild. Wah! Larry, we have like a zillion viewers already. Tell everybody who you are while I open some windows to get ready to take live comments and questions.
Well, I guess to start with the background, I was in the Navy and I saw a lot of people using Navy software and they struggled with it. And that created an interest for me. So I got out of the Navy and went to college, and I was fortunate enough to get into Don Norman's cognitive science program at UC San Diego. Yeah, Don Norman, he was an awesome, awesome professor. Yes, I still, bow to him, every morning. But he really instilled this notion of making sure that you accurately define the problem, which is, a saying that I've been using over the years. I started saying this about 30 years ago, actually, and that is, if you don't accurately define the problem, the best you can hope to do is solve the wrong problem very well. And we see that all over the place, people solving the wrong problem very well. And why is that? It's because they don't understand the cognitive side of the users. And that's what I'm trying to get at. That's what Don Norman taught me. That's what I've been practicing for 30 years. And it's really done well for us. I've designed a couple of, websites and, software medical devices that people are familiar with. Yeah, just a few. Been at this a while. I've worked on about 250 to 300 projects over the years, and I've been following this same process over these years and decades.
And is it design thinking?
Sadly, no. Not everyone can be a designer. That's all there is to it. I'm not really a good designer. I'm more of a strategist and definitely a researcher. And so one of the things we're going to talk about today is how you develop the right strategy that really helps guide your design effort so that you are solving the right problem.
And we already have some hellos quickly from the chat room. We already have hellos from Ralica and our friend Oz, who is also in the Navy and wants to know, I don't know if you ask a man his age, but he wants to know when you were in the Navy and what was your rate?
I was in Iran during the hostage crisis. That should give you something. And I was a DS, a data systems technician. How about you, Oz?
Yeah, I will find out and we'll put it up on the screen. Oz was over here in Sardinia, but that's another story. So let's also tell people, I want to read them what you and I put on LinkedIn so they're a little warmed up for what today was about, because we gave people homework. Is it okay if I read that out?
Yes.
All right. So here's what we put on LinkedIn because we gave people homework for today. If you are listening to the future audio-only podcast version, press pause, do the homework, and come back. We said, so many teams conduct observations that are just time and motion studies without understanding why people did things. If you don't understand how users think and act, and you can't design for them very well, you are still guessing. So Larry has homework for you. Consider people in a mall or train station needing to use a directory map. Confused people looking at an often confusing map. Start by guessing what the user behaviors might be. Describe the typical map user Describe the typical map user indicating their motivation, desired outcome, what they know, and what they will need to learn in order to succeed. If it's safe to do this in real life, compare your guesses to the steps that you observe. Why did users take those steps? Tip: they will be trying to learn what they don't know. We'll discuss all of this in the podcast. Get your homework started, everybody. So Larry, over to you. I'm just going to can I throw the first softball at you? Larry, What is
Sure.
observational research, and how is it different than just interviewing people?
All right. So we know that, through practice, that what people say and do are very different things. And that's because what people say tends to be biased by their own perceptions of things. And what they do is really much more unbiased and objective rather than subjective. So you'll see things that people do, but they won't describe. And why is that? Because a lot of times people have a workaround for some particular task. And they won't describe that because, well, they've already solved that problem. But if you watch them, you see that they're doing something that could be improved. Well, they have already solved it, so they're not going to describe it. So your observational research is much more objective and much more telling about what the real problems are for the users. And hopefully this homework will be an example of that.
Now, I want to throw a minor curveball at you, though I'm sure there's no curveballs for you, but someone the other day on LinkedIn tried to tell me, and I'm going to rephrase this to be a little bit less racist, but someone on LinkedIn tried to tell me the other day that, let's say that a UX researcher is going to research a bunch of blue collar workers in a factory. This person was assuming that a UX researcher who has never been a blue collar worker in a factory is not really going to observe these people correctly and not going to come to the right conclusions and might be biased in some way about these people solely because they haven't had that experience or maybe they're not the same race. Does that sound right, or does that sound off? Because then my question was then, can only black people research black people? Can only blue collar workers research blue collar workers? Where do we go with this?
Actually, the not knowing that domain is a benefit. You're much more objective. You see things. So if an Asian person watched other Asians and they were familiar with the culture, they would miss things that somebody not familiar with that culture would see. And so somebody who'd never been a blue collar, worker in a factory, they would start to see things like, wow, I never knew that. I wonder about that. Whereas somebody who'd spent their entire life in the factory probably would miss things because they're so familiar with them. And
Interesting.
so your objectivity is actually a bonus. And that's something I've said to clients over the last several decades is, it's actually a benefit to them to have me come in and look at things that they are already familiar with because they'll miss things. And it's proven true. So your objectivity is a bonus.
That's what I thought, but okay. Quick update from the chat room. Oz wants you to know he was a QM2 in the late 80s into the early 90s. And we have a hello from friend of the show, Marisol, who joins us from Panama. I think we've covered, she's a great friend of the show. So anyway, Larry, back to you, and I will interrupt from time to time with what's happening in the live chat.
Alrighty then. So let's get your keyboards ready because I want to hear from you. What did you find in your observational research, or if you couldn't go out and do it, what you guess would happen? What were some of the key observations that you made or expect to see? Anybody can enter that into the chat. I will start by saying that one of the things that you're going to notice is that there is some confusion in the users. That's obvious. Imagine yourself walking up to a directory to a mall. Now, one of the malls that I used to use during my seminars when I lived in San Diego was I'd take my class out to this place called Horton Plaza. And it was so confusing. It was actually built in three parts, three different architects. And there's actually one section where you have to go from level 3 up to level 2 in the other building. And if that's not confusing enough, trying to figure out where everything was by virtue of some, directory map that tried to convey that was very interesting to watch. It was always fun to watch. And then they did something even confusing. They had somebody else build the parking garage. And the parking garage wasn't named level 1, level 2, level 3. They named the parking garage in two sections, fruits and vegetables. And they had two floors. One was avocado and the other was tomato. Now, the average person doesn't know that an avocado and a tomato are fruits, and they'd park there and oh, we're in tomato. They'd go out into the mall and then go back to their car, and they go to the vegetable section because they didn't know. Why would you choose two confusing fruits and put them in the parking structure? Well, that was always fun to watch too. People walking around. I know I parked in tomato. Where's my car? I'm in the vegetable section. So think of all of the things that could go wrong there, and they did. So let's get back. Does anybody have any insight? Debbie, are we there?
Yeah, we got things. So Anna, who has the great pseudo last name of UXistential, over on LinkedIn said, observation, lack of comprehension. And then Ralitza is like monster live tweeting here. So let me get her comments up, because I think the chat rooms are, at least YouTube is limited to like tweet length. So she started with, number one, people looking for an information kiosk or employee. Number two, a map directory which they can navigate and interpret. Number three, signs indicating direction or landmarks nearby. She continued with 4, working with an interactive map. 5, stopping people and asking them for directions. 6, devices they can use for this purpose. She says the typical map user is confused and in need of direction. And
pun intended.
Yeah, right. And Abby said it'll be overwhelming because a lot of information. And Elijah says, I missed the homework, but I did this kind of research at the VR arcade where I work. Elijah also said, people would read the many directions we have to learn how to play. They would see the controls in the pause menu. They would not need to ask how to leave a game, etc. That's the expectation, but he says the reality, people almost never read directions. Most people don't even look at their hands when they put on a headset. Folks don't often understand the connection between the menu and the button they pressed. Yes, we are flooded with, and then Anna, UXistential, is saying an assumption easily made that all users can even read. It's flooded, Larry, flooded.
Well, you guys are on the right track, so that's good to hear. That's encouraging, because not a lot of people can do that research well. And so let me describe what I typically see. And so somebody walks up, and I like to go during the holidays when people are buying a lot of gifts. And these are usually people who haven't been to the mall very often, so they don't know where things are. First thing they do is, like you said, is they find the directory, the map. They walk up to it. And typically people are thinking, well, I want to buy something for a 6-year-old girl. My nieces, want something for Christmas. So they start looking at the different categories. So right away you have a categorization problem, because whoever made the map assumes that everybody has the same understanding of the categories of the different stores. So why don't they have things for 6-year-old nieces? Because that's not very helpful to everybody.
That's going to be anyway, quite a taxonomy.
But you know what? If you had an interactive directory map, you might be able to do that. So anyway, so the categories are not relative to the person's needs. They have to try to figure out what category best suits their need. But you know what? They don't always know what they're looking for. Do I want to get my niece clothes? Do I want to get her a toy? So they're trying to have to figure this out. They look at the map, and they find, okay, a toy store, and they see, okay, it's in blue level 2 store 103 or 203. Okay, then they look up at the map itself, because the categories are usually off to the side or down below. And then they look at the map. And how many of you saw this, where they look back at this and then back at the map? And I've seen people stand there and do that 6 times. Why? Because there's so much cognitive load going on that when they get up to the map and they're looking at it and they see, okay, this is the blue section. What number was that again? And I've seen people hold their finger on both of them so they can verify that they know what they're looking for. That gives you an indication that people are overwhelmed by having to do the translation of the category to the store number. Okay, once they've gotten that far, the next thing that they do is start getting a reference about where is that store. Okay, that's on blue level 2. What's nearby? Oh, I see. And they're called anchor stores. They're the big stores like the Macy's, the Dillard's, and things like that. And they say, okay, here's Macy's, and it's between me and Macy's. So it's around here somewhere. What was that again? Okay, it is 203. That's it. All right. And so there's a lot of that going on. Now, one of my coworkers, I work at the CyberWorks office at the Air Force Academy. We work for the Department of Air Force, and I have these guys that very knowledgeable people. And this one guy was in Mississippi, and he said the map was on one side of the directory, the categories were on the other side. It was almost like a gym exercise. You had to run from one side to the other, back, back, back. And so what are you going to do? Hold your fingers like this so that you're like, anyway.
We have a quick comment from Kathleen who says, fun fact, Horton Plaza is being turned into a tech hub. Maybe Horton Plaza 2.0 won't be as confusing.
I hope they have a lot of UX people in that tech hub.
Ooh, please, please. Okay, sorry, continue.
Well, that was good to know. So anyway, once they get an idea where it is, and then what do you think the next step is from they found the place on the map? What do you think they try to do? Anybody? Comments?
Well, they're 20 seconds delayed, so come on, guys, put some things in the comments. And Ralitza says, just walk the floor and figure it out. But I think first they're going to try to figure out their path, like which escalator do I need to go up, or where am I now, and how am I going to get there?
Where am I now? Because even though there's that little orange
Deborah
dot
got
that
it.
says,
guess who's here? Deborah Gill Hasselgrave is here, and she said, "Where am I?" You win. You win. Go ahead.
Deborah and I go way back, by the way.
I know.
So anyway, it reminds me of this cartoon. It was called Ziggy. It was just a one-frame cartoon. And Ziggy is at the mall looking at a map, and there's an orange dot that says, "You are here." And he looks up and he says, "Uncanny. How did it know?"
Right. Very good.
So anyway, you first have to orient where you are. But the problem is, even though there's that little orange dot on there, you don't still really know where you're looking. And so the biggest problem that we have is that map is on a vertical plane, yet our world is horizontal. And so that means then that we have to do this rotational translation from vertical to horizontal and get our bearings. And so then people start looking at, you can see them point to like, okay, I'm here, there's J.C. Penney's, and that I could see that right there. So I must be looking this way on the map, which means then that if blue 203 is over here, then that means I have to look that direction. And so you see a lot of that going on. And so what we see in that observation is that spatial translation that people have to make in order to orient themselves. And so then people think, okay, I have to go to in that direction and then down this hallway. So here's the interesting thing. When you look at these directory maps, they try to use colors to help orient. Like there's the red section, the green section, the blue section. But guess what? None of the hallways are red, green, or blue.
We have that problem with the San Francisco mass transit system. The map shows the subway or metro lines as red and yellow and green and blue, and they're not by color. They're by destination or origin. And I see tourists all the time. I even wrote a blog post like, "Attention tourists to San Francisco, the subways are not red and yellow and green and blue the way they are in Boston." Sorry, keep going.
Yeah, and so that's a perfect example. The Metro, MARTA, New York subway, BART, they all do the same thing, but
it was BART.
Only Boston has actual colors. So anyway, people have to do that translation, and then they have to figure out what floor are they on versus what floor do they need to go. And then they're looking for the escalators, the elevators, and things like that. So, but what is the most telling observation? I'm going to give people a little bit of time to respond to this. And
I have a guess.
Somebody mentioned it early on. Yes.
My guess would be, if you creepily follow them, you will see them stop at another directory map.
Horton Plaza was so confusing that they actually put on the directory map where the next directory map was.
And we've got
to help you solve that.
There you go. We've got a comment from Abby who says, in maps, I have seen north or south mentioned instead of left or right from where you are standing, as if everyone has a compass and an Indiana Jones hat.
Yeah. And you're inside, so you can't see where north and south is.
Right.
So, but at least somebody made an effort to try to solve the problem, but they just didn't solve it correctly. But Debbie, you were correct. If you creepily watch them, what do you think happens? Yes, but their destination isn't what you thought. They don't even get that far. Where do they go?
They stop for ice cream.
They go,
I don't know.
They go to the closest kiosk in their general direction. I used to do this. I used to go to the mall and watch people use the directory and follow them. And then I started asking the people at kiosks, hey, do you get a lot of people stopping here? Oh, yeah. What's the most common question?
How do I get to? Yeah.
How do I get to? And that's because that whole cognitive effort of finding the category, finding it on the map, doing the spatial rotation, and you're trying to create, where am I, trying to figure out directions, never really solved the problem. People are still lost to the point where they need additional help. So by watching all of that, I'm going to ask you, Debbie, to pull up the slides.
Yeah, of course.
So what we saw, the first slide there you'll see, is when we do user research, there's 4 things that we really look for. What are manually intensive tasks? What do people have to do manually? What are mentally intensive tasks or cognitively demanding tasks? And what are error-prone tasks? And what are the knowledge dependencies? So if you find any of those 4 things, then there's an opportunity to identify room for improvement. So the manually intensive task here wasn't so manual, other than pointing and things like that, which means then that people still need a way to relate a store with what they're looking for. The error-prone task was the translational spatial translation task, because it was so hard to do that from the map that they would doubt themselves, and they were actually accurately doubting themselves because they didn't still have the spatial map, in their head. And the knowledge dependency. What knowledge are they going to need in order to find that store? So I'm done with this screen if you want to take it away.
Do you want the next slide, or do you want me again?
No, just you again. You're much better than any slide.
Oh, butter, covered in butter.
Now, let's talk about, now that we've identified some of the user characteristics here, the cognitive characteristics, and these are the problems that we try to solve in UX design. So our user research has to try to identify them. You follow those 4 things, you will. Let's talk about the knowledge dependencies, because knowledge design is the most successful approach I've used over the years. How do you embed your knowledge to help the users? So this is a wayfinding task that we're talking about, going through a mall. What are some key things? And I'm asking people to submit some ideas. How would you solve them? What are some ways that you can embed knowledge into the user's task and come up with a different solution? And think outside the box. Don't limit yourself to what you see. Because you'll guess right, won't you?
Maybe. And I'm looking for a photo that I can't find because I don't remember when I took it, which is a whole other UX question, how I can't find a photo because I don't remember when I took it.
So let me ask you this. When you've been to the mall, you know, that store number blue 203, right? One, we know that the mall is not oriented by color. Yes,
Right.
they have many different, you know, hallways and all of that, but there's no color in them. And the other problem is, have you ever seen the address numbers on the stores?
No, there is no 203,
Yeah,
everybody.
right. So, how do you find the store? What would be an aid that you could impart onto the user to help them gain the knowledge they need in order to find that store? Anybody? Do we have any submissions for ideas?
Let's see. We have a couple of things up here. Let's see. We've got Elijah says using visuals instead of numbers and arbitrary colors, and he wants augmented reality, but he's a very AR VR guy. He's ahead of us.
Well, he's on
Uh,
the right track. Exactly what visual would you give them?
Ralitza says first need to establish the most confusing parts, second understand why they're confusing, analyze, and base solution on input.
Yep, I agree with that.
Okay, what visuals? Oh, hold on, we've got one from Kathleen. Kathleen says put the address in the store or in the floor in front of the store.
You know, instead of an address, because you're not really looking for an address, you're looking for the store. What if there was an image of what the storefront looked like? So an address is good, but you know, nobody thinks of a shopping mall by virtue of the addresses. What you can do is show what the store looks like and the store in front of it and the store, you know, behind it, so that as you're walking along, you have that visual pattern. We are half of our brain is devoted to the visual cortex, or a third of it, all depends on how you want to define that. But think, so much of our brain is oriented around visual. Let's leverage that. We are very good at pattern recognition, color recognition. So if you provided an image, so for instance, what if it was an interactive map and you could click on the store, you know, blue 203, and up came an image of what that store looked like and the neighboring stores look like. So as you're walking along, you would see and recognize the pattern.
Oh, like a
And
Google
what if we
Street
put
View. Like this is what
something
it would
like
look
that?
like if
Yes.
you were standing there.
Right, or as you approached from the direction that you're at, because the directory map, like Ziggy said, uncanny, knows where you are. And so you could actually put waypoints. So think about when you're driving a car, you know, you're walking along, you're not looking for street signs as much as you're looking for other waypoints. So if someone said, yeah, turn right on Main Street, right? That's one thing. But if they said turn right at the big tree at the gas station, then you would have a better idea where to turn, because we're much more visual than we are textual, if you will, because text is sometimes hard to read. So that is my homework assignment. I hope somebody got something out of that. But we're going to talk a little bit more about knowledge design and different ways we can do that. So um, yes, Nick Fine. Hi, Nick.
Dr. Nick
Uh,
says, but for some people, they're getting lost looking for a matching image or signpost.
right, but what if you gave waypoints, visual waypoints, like go past this, you know, very obvious ones, like go past the Macy's, you know, so that they know that they're on the right track, as opposed to, oh yeah, you're looking for this one little storefront. So that's a good point. All right, so let's talk a little bit more about knowledge design. One of the examples that I like to use is ProFlowers. That's something I designed over 20 years ago now. One of the interesting things was, from the observations, instead of watching people buy online, because I know how people use, you know, online, even back then, this is 1997, we went out and watched people buy flowers in a flower shop. And what was very interesting about that was watching the interaction between the customer, who knew nothing about flowers. Most people, when they buy flowers, don't know that much about them. Think men buying flowers for women, right? What do men know about flowers? Roses, maybe baby tears, maybe if they're lucky. But they don't know anything about chrysanthemums, tiger lilies, or anything like that. So they walk into the store, they walk up to the display case, and the clerk comes up and says, "Can I help you?" And the guy says, "Yeah, I need some flowers." And the clerk says, "Well, you're in a flower
What'd you do now?
shop, so yeah." The next question that the clerk asks is, "What did you do wrong?" Because men almost always are buying flowers because they screwed up somehow. So interestingly enough, when we designed ProFlowers initially to do usability testing, we had a category called "I'm sorry." They made us take that out. But the point is, people needed flowers not for the flowers, but for an occasion. So the guy would say, "Well, I forgot my wife's birthday." "Oh, I understand. So over here, we have our apology bouquets that are perfect for missing your wife's birthday. So how sorry are you? $39.99, $49.99, or $79.99? So did you forget again last year? So that's $79.99. So anyway, the UX strategy that we came up with was ProFlowers doesn't sell flowers. They sell occasions. And that's because what we observed was that guys didn't know anything about the flowers. They weren't there to buy a special type of flower. They were there to buy a bouquet that basically said, "I'm sorry, dear, I won't let this happen again." And then, the guy would say, "Well, I'm looking at all these bouquets. My wife really likes purple, so I'll take this purple bouquet." Never once was there a mention of flowers. So when you looked at all of the other websites back in 1997, 1998, they were all organized around the flowers. And they actually expected visitors to build a bouquet because that's how florists think. Florists think in terms of bouquets. Well, florists weren't going to these sites to buy flowers. So ProFlowers created a host of bouquets, and they would organize them by virtue of the occasion, not the flower. So you said, "Oh yeah, I forgot my wife's birthday. Let me look at the birthday bouquets. Oh yeah, this one's purple. Let me choose that." That design has changed the entire online florist industry. And that was done, 20 some odd years ago. And for over 20 years, ProFlowers had a conversion rate at around 26%. That's 10 times higher than the average of any e-commerce website other than like Land's End or Schwab's or anything like that, Schwann's. So by understanding the users and knowing and learning what they need to know in order to succeed, but won't, and that enabled ProFlowers to be able to embed the knowledge into their design. So another example I like to give about knowledge design is, how many of you remember the MP3 players that came out about 20 years ago? There was this, Sony had one, there was the Zune, there was Casio had one, but we don't really remember them. Well, what's interesting about that is that, everybody knows that whole market was taken over by iPods. But how did that happen? Well, remember back when you had these MP3 players, you had 4 basic steps and 5 different interfaces you had to deal with. First, you had to go to mp3.com. Hi, Michael. Michael Robertson, who is the CEO for mp3.com, was my classmate. So no surprise that he used his cog-sci knowledge to be able to do it. He was one of the leaders in the class. So you go to mp3.com, you find your music, and then you have to select it and download it into a directory, which meant you had to go to your computer and create a directory for your music. And then once you had it in a directory, then you had to use something like Music Match, which was a playlist manager to create playlists to put into your MP3. And then you had to use the proprietary software to upload it into the MP3 player, and then finally you got to play it. Think about that. That was 5 interfaces. MP3, Music Match, your computer's directory, the software to upload it, and then the interface on the MP3 player. Not surprisingly, less than 1 million units were sold worldwide of those. And people were starting to say, well, that's a lot of work. And the average mainstream user didn't know enough to be able to do that. So what did Apple do that was so different? The iPod was actually pretty cool, It had a nice jog dial interface, but it didn't still solve the problem. So iPod didn't sell that many units their first year. It wasn't until Apple married up the iPod, iTunes, and the Apple Store all together that they solved this problem. Because when they did that, you go to the Apple Store and you find your music. So that's one interface. And you select it. As soon as you selected it, it automatically downloaded it into your computer. And you didn't have to create a directory. You didn't have to do anything. And then iTunes automatically created 4 generic playlists: album, artist, genre, and decade. So you would have Dave Matthews Band, the whatever album, soft rock, and the 90s or 2000s, right? So anyway, that took away that whole problem for you. And then when you plug the iPod in, it automatically uploaded, eliminated that interface and that problem for you. And then all you had to do was play it. So it went from 4 steps, 5 interfaces, to 1 interface and 1.5 steps. Apple used their knowledge in order to make the task easier. And after they did that, the iPod sold 20 million units that next year. So that's an example of knowledge design. Well, let's do a little bit more of an example. I had a project in San Diego that's pretty cool, where we found something, and they're still working on it, but I'll go ahead and describe it. So Debbie, can you pull up that slide with the baseball stuff on it?
I will, but first I'm going to just very quickly break for some of the plugs that we tend to do mid-show. So first of all, I want to remind everybody to please sign up for my upcoming Acture course, which is going to be December 3 and 4. You'll also get the, hi, I'm here. You'll also get the video course, other way. You'll get the, thank you, the video course with it. It's a live 2-day core skills course. You will go from, oh my God, Acture is scary, to confident intermediate prototyping, all for $60. 60 American. Please visit deltacx.link/DEC2020 to sign up and grab your spot now. And I also want to remind people that if you are watching on YouTube, won't you please usability test the subscribe button. I know about 2/3 of our watchers are subscribers. I thank you so much for that. Please subscribe, ring that bell, and of course, empathize with the like button. Step 1, create empathy for the like button. And of course, you can also join our Slack workspace, which is totally free. It's a fun little community of low ego action heroes. And you can also access me if you need to. That's deltacx.link/join Slack. And the last plug I have is just to remind everybody that I'm not just a friendly YouTube host. I also do CX and UX work, the full spectrum of it, everything but visual design, through Delta CX, which is my CX and UX agency. So if there's anything that I and my team of low ego action heroes can possibly do for you or your company, I love writing proposals, believe it or not. So please let me know. Get in touch at deltacx.com. Okay, no sponsors. That's the plugs. Back to Larry. I'm going to shift to your slides.
All right. So here's the problem. The problem is that you're a field manager for a recreation department of a big county. Your fields are watered on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and then you allow people to play. So, but the thing is, you have a 3-day baseball tournament coming up next month, and you got to prepare for it. The interesting thing about that is you can't water on your normal schedule, because then the field will be wet when they try to play ball, and it'll tear up the field. So what do? Well, most field managers understand how to do things this way. And not only that, this is a static program that they have in the controllers. So, and they might have a half a dozen fields around the county that they have to manage. So they set the controllers and leave them. But if you have a 3-day baseball tournament, you have to make a change to this. And so what changes do you make? Well, these managers aren't all that familiar with some of these little intricacies. So what we learned was that there's a best practice approach for preparing a field. You can't just stop watering, because then the field dries out. So what you have to do is prepare the field, like overwater it first. So go to the next slide, Debbie.
Okay, there we go.
This is a controller. You have to make all of these changes at every field. Now, this one controller isn't the only one. They may have 3 or 4 different controllers at a single field. And if you have a half a dozen fields, think about all the changes you have to make. And every controller is slightly different. So go to the next slide.
Oh, okay.
So this is the actual program you need to run over a 2-week period in order to prepare for the baseball tournament. There you see it on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, as evidenced by the baseballs. And so what you have to do is water on Monday like normal, and Wednesday, and then you have to go in and change the program so it waters on Thursday. Then you have to change it so it doesn't water on Friday, and then you have to make it so it only sprinkles on Saturday and Sunday nights, so that it, the grass has a little bit of water, but not enough to tear it up. And then you have to change it again so it sprinkles on Monday and Tuesday, and then change it again to sprinkle on Wednesday, Thursday, and then you're right. Change it one more time so you're right back where you're going, where before. And that was my wife. You were on here. It's okay.
No extra charge.
So no autographs, please. So here's the thing. This program is what we call a best practice approach for managing the field. And you can't necessarily go out and expect the field technicians to go out and change all of the controls, all of the controllers without making a mistake. So what do you need? You need a system that reaches out from your desktop, from at your office, all the way out to all of the controls. And you can borrow this template, and the system would automatically generate this program for the user. So by doing this, we're incorporating a best practice approach into the problem domain so that you don't have to rely on the highly variable individual level of skill and knowledge of each of the field managers, because they're all different and they all know a few things. But this is an approach that the company can sell to these field managers and say, if you have a 3-day tournament and you have this type of soil and this type of grass, here is a template you can use. This is a best practice approach. This is how you can embed your knowledge into the domain so that you make the users more successful than they would otherwise be on their own knowledge and skill. The thing to remember here is knowledge is more important and more valuable than just the tool. If you can embed the knowledge into your design, you are making your company a knowledge company. Apple has made themselves a knowledge company. Microsoft, not so much. Microsoft tools are still cumbersome and hard to use. Apple tools tend to be much easier. And that's because Apple says, here's a best practice approach for doing digital music with the iPod. I mean, the way they came up with the iPhone was actually a migration from the iPod way of thinking. They have made it easy for the average person to be able to use a cell phone. Now, I had a cell phone before iPhones were available, and they were kind of clunky. The iPhone made it much easier because Apple put their knowledge into the design. So let me give you another example of how you do that, and that's by task analysis. So
Golden, before you go into task analysis, let me quickly remind people we've got 15 more minutes to the broadcast. If you have questions about observational research or the idea of knowledge design, please make sure you're putting your questions in the LinkedIn or YouTube chat rooms right now. I'm monitoring them, and I will allow Professor Larry to continue. But I want to make sure that if anybody has questions while we've got them today, get those questions in there. Okay, back to you, and let me know if you want that last slide at any point.
Nope, no, we're good there.
Okay.
So what I'm going to describe now, how you make a task-oriented design and how you embed knowledge into it. So let's say you buy a car, a used car, and the person who had the car said, I don't know that much about cars. I know it needs new spark plugs, and I didn't put them in, so I'll knock $100 off the price. And you think that's fair. So you give the seller the money, and she gives you the keys, and off you go. And then you realize, I've never changed spark plugs before either, so I'm not really sure what to do. But you ask one of your engineer friends at work, And he says, yeah, I got a garage full of tools, and you're welcome to come over and use them. And all the drawers are labeled. I won't be there this weekend, but go use the garage. So you go over there, open the garage door, wall-to-wall tool chest, and then you notice all the drawers are labeled. You think, wow, this is great. And then you see that the labels are hammers, screwdrivers, sockets. And then you start opening drawers going, I don't even know what tools I need. But you remember that your UX friend said she had a garage full of tools also, and you're welcome to go use it. And you figure, UX, this ought to be much easier. Go over there, open her garage door, and wall-to-wall tool chest. But guess what? Her drawers are labeled differently. They're labeled by virtue of the task: change oil, change tire, change spark plugs. And instead of having a drawer full of all the sockets that the person has in their entire garage, you open that drawer, there's one socket, one handle, and a little rubber hose. And you wonder, what's the hose for? And then there's a sign on there that says, after you loosen the spark plugs, stick the hose on the end of the spark plug so you can pull it out of the cylinder head. Who knew that you needed that rubber hose? She did. And she basically put the very tools that you needed for that one task in that drawer. That is task-oriented design. And she used her knowledge to make you succeed, though you've never even changed spark plugs before. So that's task-oriented design. But how do you get to task-oriented design? So Debbie, let's show the ProFlowers task flow.
Oh no. Is that in this deck?
No, it's not. It's the two images I sent separately.
All right, hold on.
You didn't pull them up.
I didn't. While I go get those, Anna, UX Essential, has a question. Maybe you can field her question and I'll try to bring those into the system. Anna says, thank you, sorry. Anna says, any directional tips on how we can improve observational research under the conditions of COVID-19?
I have a team that I work with at CyberWorks, which is the Department of Air Force program, to help solve a lot of different problems. We have faced that. About the only thing you can do for the most part is some type of interview, almost like a contextual inquiry, where you try to get people to describe scenarios that they do. And as they talk through the scenario, you're trying to imagine what would go on. If they have any artifacts that they can show, like this is the screen I look at, or something like that, then that's about as close as you can come. You have to, do just interviews. So, but that's a really good question.
Okay, thank you. Hold on, I've got things. I don't have your picture on there yet, but I've got things. All right, do you want to talk about this while I add your photo? Oh wait, I muted you. Hold on. Give me a second. I'm pressing too many buttons and I'm unprepared for my own technology. Okay, Larry, try now.
All right, so this is a task flow that I like to do. I like to show this one. This is a simple version of ProFlowers. So there I am.
Hold on, I'm making you small and interesting.
The smaller, the more interesting. So I use different colors to represent different things. The green ones are the steps that the user has to take. The yellow ones are steps that the system would take. And so this was the original flow, but the orange, these are usually Post-its. The orange ones are, what are the issues or questions that come up here? So the two choices are you either select a bouquet or build a bouquet. How is the user supposed to know what the right bouquet is? Now, there are some bouquets that are very inappropriate. Like you're not going to get white lilies to celebrate somebody's birthday because that's a funeral bouquet, and that would really piss somebody off. And even if you were to build a bouquet, how would you know which flowers to look for? So this basically represents the type of things that you're trying to identify. It's not so much what's individual steps is somebody taking, what's going on in their head, what's almost really, this is more of a cognitive flow. And then let's go to the next image. So once you do that task flow, Then you want to try to optimize it. And one of the things I like to say is, how do you replace the green stickies with yellow stickies? How do you get the system, which is the yellow one, to do more of the work for the user? So for instance, if you look at ProFlowers, their big thing is you select an occasion, and then once the user selects an occasion, the system displays bouquets that are appropriate just for that occasion. And then the user reviews the bouquets, find one they like for instance, my wife likes purple, and then you select it and off you go. Now, what's interesting about ProFlowers is that it deviated from a lot of e-commerce sites in that it, at the time, I don't know if they still do, they got bought by FTD recently. We did not have a shopping cart, because if you've ever been to a florist shop, you'll notice that they don't have shopping carts. But what we did was, there are seducible moments in this process. Notice I have at the very bottom, write a card. As soon as a guy starts writing anything, roses are red, violets are blue, that's Pulitzer Prize winning literature right there. And they are emotionally tied and engaged with that flow, with that event. And so then that becomes a seducible moment where you can offer, these might arrive in a box, but they might need a vase to be put in. Would you like to buy a vase? Oh, yeah, sure. Okay, would you like to buy a teddy bear to go with it too? Because you really screwed up. So then there's no shopping cart. There's no add to cart, because add to cart in this context removes the emotional investment. It depersonalizes the interaction. So we don't have a shopping cart in here because nowhere in the task flow was a shopping cart there. So sometimes you have to think outside of the box and question the typical scenarios that you see. Not everything requires a shopping cart. And if you don't have a shopping cart, how do you upsell the user? Well, you create emotional investment. So now this is probably a good time to ask people, if they have any other questions. So I can keep talking until people come up with good.
Yes, Jason.
I'm running out of things.
No, you're never running out of things. Jason wants to know, what is a task-based persona versus some other type of persona?
Jason, after my own heart. So given this task analysis and task-oriented approach, one of the things we have to understand is that the typical persona is far too generic to basically give us the insight we need, especially the knowledge component. So a task persona composite understands that a persona is specific to a task. So you may have a user that is really good, say an Excel user, who's really good at pivot tables, and another one that's really good at drawing charts. Well, you can't create one persona that knows both of those and say, okay, we have this persona, and expect the chart builder to be very good at pivot tables. They're not. That's a separate persona. So what we try to do is identify the knowledge components of a particular persona relative to that task and keep it just to that task. So a persona includes, what's the trigger? What's the motivation for them to perform a task? Then we look at what is their desired outcome, and everybody has a separate outcome for each task. And then what knowledge do they bring to that task? What do they know? My wife likes purple flowers, and that's it. And then what do they need to know in order to succeed? So in ProFlowers, it would be, I need the right bouquet that says I'm sorry. I don't want to get the wrong bouquet. And then you look at the artifacts that they need. And in this case, they need to see a host of bouquets that are specific to apologizing for missing a birthday. So we have one persona for that task. Now, there may be a persona for building a bouquet, but guess what? It's not the same person. It's not the same persona, because that build a bouquet persona has more knowledge that they can bring to the table. So we don't want to confuse all that. A general persona is not going to be good enough to serve all of your task needs. I hope that answered the question, Jason.
Yeah, and we've got a question from Abby, who asks, is it more about understanding the mental model and then mixing different actions to a generic task flow?
No, because that's not a task-oriented flow. Then what you have there is you're more of a feature oriented flow where you have all of these features that satisfy many different tasks on the same screen. In a task-oriented design, you're focusing a screen on a specific task. A task may take several screens to do, but each screen is only focused on that one task. So a generic task flow would end up with trying to add features to the different steps so that you could do many of the different flows, and that doesn't work. But it is about understanding the mental model and also what mental model that task flow creates for the user, because sometimes you can mold the user based on your design.
All right. We don't have, while we wait for questions, quick show notes. Just a reminder, tomorrow is Tuesday, so that's office hours Ask Me Anything at its usual time, 6:30 p.m. in Italy. Please adjust your clocks for wherever the heck you are. We're going to have a special guest taking live questions, one of our favorite guys, Joel Barr. He and I will be taking your questions live for an hour. Wednesday, we'll have Leon Dries back. She's an HR and recruitment specialist. She's going to talk about job titles and levels. Skip to next week, and even though it's American Thanksgiving, on Monday the 23rd, I'm going to be doing my CX strategies for reinventing the customer experience presentation and take your questions. Tuesday the 24th is Office Hours Ask Me Anything with, if they will still come, two special guests taking your questions live, Darren Hood and Dr. Nick Fine. Let's see, Wednesday the 25th. I just planned this morning. We have a human factors engineer coming on talking about what the heck is being a human factors engineer. So join us on Wednesday the 25th. Let's see, and then Monday... let's see. Tuesday, December 1st, Office Hours Ask Me Anything. Also, again, if they will come, Darren and Dr. Nick. Okay, we have a few more questions. Can you run a little bit late to take a few more questions?
Sure.
All right, so we've got a few questions in the chat. Let's take them, and then we're going to have to say goodbye to everybody. And Frederick asks, how much observational research would you need to do in order to take action? I know a lot of people often come to the sessions and ask, how many people do I need to observe?
Well, sometimes you can do it in one observation. I did that recently on a project, but normally I like to have at least 3, maybe even 5 observations of the same task before I can start to generalize. That's a really good question.
Alrighty, and Tara asks, can you say how you might organize your information differently on a website, IA, when doing task-oriented design, maybe using your flowers example?
Oh, that's a good question. I was going to mention that. Thanks, Tara. So one of the things you want to remember is that in a task-oriented design, you may need to replicate features or content in different parts of the task or in different parts of the website for different tasks. So a good example is kbb.com, which is the Kelley Blue Book car pricing website. And there's basically 2 things that you want to do on their site. You either want to find out how much your car is worth if you were to sell it, and how much you would pay for another car. What's interesting about that is that both of those tasks use the same tool, but in a different way. So it's okay to replicate content or features in different parts of the website to serve different tasks. So if you're trying to figure out how much your car is worth, you use a vehicle identification tool. But because it's your car, you know all of the features that it has, all of the trim packages, all of the options, all of the things you added to it. So you can get very specific about what that car is. But when you're looking to find out how much you should pay for another car, like you want an SUV, well, you don't know how many miles that each SUV has. You don't know what trim packages it has. So this vehicle selection tool is slightly modified for that task, but it's still the same tool. So it's okay to replicate content or features down different task paths. So that way you don't have to force the user to go to that one feature and figure out how to use it differently for those 2 paths. You can do that for them. That's how you incorporate knowledge into the design and make it task oriented.
Awesome. And what it looks like our last question, I'm going to read it and then I'm going to kind of give you a variation of it. Ralitsa says, what are the main outcomes of a successful observational study? And I'd like to add to that by saying, how do we know when an observational study has been successful versus when it's failed in some way?
The first thing that you'll notice is that you should have identified a problem that nobody has described before. You will notice something in the observation. And I have to say, I've been doing this for almost 300 projects now. And in every case, I found a problem, an unmet need that nobody else had identified or described. And that's typically because nobody did the observation. They just kind of guessed at it or
Surveyed.
Surveyed, or they just followed what the other companies were doing. And you don't want to follow everybody else, because who's to say that they did the research and got it right? They didn't, trust me. So one of the first things you'll notice is that you'll have an aha moment, like, wow, look at that. So if you're looking at those four things, what's manually intensive, what's mentally demanding, what's error prone, or knowledge dependent, you will find one of those, at least one of those. And that will be your clue that your observations were identifying what you needed to identify. I hope that helped.
Love it. Love it. So we're going to have to hit the road. We're out of time, but just for people listening, Larry is spelled Larry. Marine is spelled M like Mary, Arine. Larry, where can people find you, follow you, connect with you? What do you like?
I'm on LinkedIn. I'm also on Twitter as UX Strategy, but I don't pay much attention to that. I'm on LinkedIn at least once a day. So if you have any questions or anything, feel free to ask. I love answering questions.
Wonderful. We're getting lots and lots of thank yous in the chat. Everybody saying thank you. Jason, thank you. He gave you a heart. Tara says thank you. Deborah, your good old buddy Deborah, says thank you in all caps, which means she really means it. Ralitsa says thank you, Larry. Elijah says thank you for the great talk. Abi says thank you very much. So a universe of gratitude, and also from me as well. I'm so thrilled and honored to have you here. I hope it won't be the last time. And any parting words for anybody? Any books you recommend? Because usually our peeps are asking, what books should I be reading to do better at UX?
Well, obviously, Don Norman's Design of Everyday Things. But here's a book that most people don't know about that's really good, and that is a book about task analysis. And the authors are Ginny Reddish and Joanne Hackos. And I point people to that book all the time, and people tend to find it very useful. So I recommend it.
Is it just called Task Analysis?
Design.
Oh, Task Analysis.
Just Google Task. Yeah. And you know what? Go to Amazon and look up Task Analysis, and you'll see it.
Yes, I'm in my Kindle store right now, trying to see if I can find it so I can tell everybody else what it is. Here it is. User and Task Analysis for Interface Design by Joanne Hackos, Hackos, and Janice Reddish, Red like Delta, Ish. It is not cheap, but it is available. And if Larry recommends it, then we should be buying it. So that's how I feel about that. All right, with a million more thank yous in the room from names I've never even seen before. So thank you, new friends of the show. Don't forget to subscribe, empathize with the like button, and I'm going to play us out of here. Larry, thank you again, and so grateful. See everybody soon. Be well. Thanks for watching. Delta CX is available for consulting and projects related to CX and UX strategy, leadership, training, problem finding, problem solving, and innovation. Learn more at deltacx.com.